Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on wherever you are in the world and whatever time you're watching this. And welcome to Coding Bootcamp 2023. Learn to program with us from August 14th to the 18th, 2023. We're here all week with loads of sessions for you. This session is Why Work Hard? How to be a lazy coder and still create beautiful apps and a stack of money. This is going to be a kind of overview of development in general, a few tips and a bit of advice on, the business of being a developer. I've been doing it for a long time, and I'm going to give you the benefit of some of my experience, good or bad, and see how it fits in with what your thoughts are as well. If you're an experienced developer, this is probably going to give you not an awful lot of help, but a few tips maybe that, I don't know, I've been around for a long time. But that's what this session's all about, the business of being a developer. My name is Ian Barker, and I'm the Embarcadero Developer Advocate. You can reach me on my email at ian.barker@embarcadero.com. You can follow me on X or Twitter, depending on whatever you still want to call it, and @punctuation, and go to my website and read some more about me and what I do at about.me/Ian Barker. The slides for this are going to be available at tinyurl.com/EMBT coder. So, you want to be a software developer, a coder, a software engineer, a programmer, a computer programmer, whatever you want to call it. I've been called lots of different things. I think once upon a time my passport used to say computer programmer. Now for occupation it probably says software developer. They're all the same thing, and it's a career, it's a job where you're writing programs for a living usually, and you get paid for it. Great. It's the best job in the world, really. Everyone knows you get paid a ton of money to play around with computers all day. Actually, it's also the worst job in the world, really. You know why? Because everyone thinks you get paid a ton of money to play around with computers all day. Isn't that the truth? But you know what? If you still want to be a software developer, then great, because I can tell you after over 38 years as a full-time professional software developer, I still love my job. I get up really early every day. I start work around about 7 a.m. I work mostly for myself programming, but I do other things as well. But I get up and code for a living, and I love it. It's what I do, and I really enjoy it. I get up every day and I write code, and I really do mean that. Things you'll be told by other developers and people as you're trying to look into the business of becoming a developer. They'll say things like, real developers have to pull all-nighters. That's where you literally stay up all night, write a bunch of code, and you work hard on a particular bug or something like that, trying to get it delivered. And the general term for it is an all-nighter. And you'll be told, yes, you've got to do that. As a developer, it's common, to be working into the small hours of the morning. And you know what? Some developers do work better in the evening. Some developers work better in the morning, and some developers like a 9-to-5 job. I know plenty of them that literally work as if they work in an office, filing papers or something like that, and that suits them. Not all developers are like that, and in fact I would say over the years, the hundreds of developers I've bumped into, that's probably not common. Most developers have got a slight skew one way or the other. If they work flexi time, then quite often you'll find many of them will start late because they prefer to start late. I find I'm more productive in the morning, but who knows, maybe I'm a bit weird. The other thing you get told is real developers prefer the command line or terminal if you're using Mac OS or Linux. And when we're talking about Linux, people also say, real developers, if you're going to be a real developer, you must use Linux. And the other thing you get told all the while, and I know Mark Zuckerberg, I've seen the Social Network movie, and I'm guessing some of it is based on the truth. Mark Zuckerberg, he swears by Vim. I think he actually used Emacs, to be honest, as well. But same kind of thing. They're text-based editors. Emac's very powerful. You can add lots of script into it and things like that. But Vim is, when I first started out coding, I used to have to use Vi, which was the Unix version of Vim. Vim is kind of an improved, modernized version of Vi. And that was the thing. If you were a proper coder, then you sat there and you typed in the command line and you used Vim and you used Vi. And that was how you typed code, and it came out of your head and onto the screen, and just like the Matrix or something like that, you see people banging away on the keyboard and typing lots of impenetrable commands, and that's Linux command line and Vim, and that's what you'll get told. You'll get told that all the time. But you know what? That's not necessarily true. And I say this as someone who's managed many developers. I've had teams of 30 people working under me, to all sorts of organisations I've worked in with other developers. And I'm a developer advocate. My job is developer relations, so I bump into a lot of developers, and I can tell you, it is true. Sometimes you do end up pulling an all-nighter, and the reason is that as a developer, you get into a thing called flow. And I don't know if there are other jobs like this. I'm sure there are lots of concentration required in some jobs or other. But a developer particularly is a creative job. People believe it's a scientific job, but it's as much art as it is science. Not all will agree with me on that, but personally I think that's true. And that means that sometimes when you're in that creative flow where the things are just coming out of your head, buzzing away, and your programming is just on fire inside you, you don't want to stop. Or, more unfortunately, you've got some kind of deadline to meet and you really do have to have it done by such and such a day. Or you're working on something critical. I sometimes work on payroll packages where there could be several thousand employees waiting to get paid. They might not get paid if I don't fix a particular problem or a bug or something that's gone wrong in a server. And you have to keep going until it's done, and that sometimes means yes, you will pull all-nighters, and I've done it, I don't know, 10, 15 times probably in my career, maybe more. I don't know, I don't remember them all. You kind of go into a fugue after a while. About an hour before you'd normally get up, that's when it really hits in. Doesn't matter how much caffeine you pump down you're still that hour before you normally wake up, it'll kill you. And the other thing that we said was real developers prefer the command line. Nope, not true. Some do. Some like it. Some believe that it's a very terse and very efficient way to interact with the computer. But now I can tell you, I started out on Unix machines in the late 70s and early 80s, DOS machines, and very weird esoteric machines like VAX VMS and mumps even, which is, yes, it's a disease, but it's also an operating system. And yes, you did use the command line a lot, but nowadays, once Xerox invented the idea of a graphical user interface, and then it was adopted by the likes of Apple with their Mac, and Windows, which came about when Microsoft obviously were also inspired by what went on at the Xerox PARC. There was a reason why that became very popular, and it was because you could have normal people using the computers, and the normal people found that it was actually quicker to click on little menu items and things like that than it was to type in commands in a command line. And in fact, even back in the days of Unix, I remember having to write lots of menu systems that would show a little menu up on the screen, and you would type a number so that a command would occur. So you didn't have to remember all these very bizarre command lines. So real developers prefer the command line. Some do, but actually mostly that is not true. The other thing is real developers use Linux. Again, not true. Yes, plenty of developers do use Linux. There are lots of good reasons for it. You can customize it in ways that are not possible in other operating systems. I personally have Linux machines and Windows machines, and in fact even on my Windows machine I use the WSL2, so Windows System for Linux, and I have that open continually all the time. So yes, you do use it, but actually, if you're just developing for Windows, you're probably not going to use Linux all the time. So no, some do, but many don't. And Vim is the best editor if you're a masochist. Vim is extremely efficient if you know all the commands to move text around, and yank lines is one of the commands in Vim and stuff like that. And yes, you can do a lot of weird things, but that's like saying, well, I'm never going to use a car, or I'm never going to use a bicycle, I'm going to walk absolutely everywhere, I won't fly and I won't sail. Well, great, but then you'll never go anywhere. You will not progress from, the villages that you grew up in, which is what happened back in medieval times. So if you want to stick with Vim, go ahead, but it's not really common for regular developers, and it's not very efficient. And this whole thing that I'm going to be talking about today is about efficiency, and efficiency means that you can go ahead and earn money better, in better ways, because you're being more efficient. Efficiency means you save time and save effort, and time and effort are actually a direct cost and a direct benefit to you. Other things you'll be told: mobile app development is the future. You should be doing mobile apps. Oh my word, why are you not doing a mobile app? You're going to be left behind and you're going to be absolutely overwhelmed, because it's the future. The other thing you get told is, oh, it should be a web app. Web development is the future. Everything should be a web app. Okay, it should be a web page. It should have a web front end, blah, 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 blah. Desktop apps are dead. They'll tell you desktop apps are completely dead. You'll make no money doing those. It's absolutely pointless. You won't get anything out of it. And the other thing is declarative interfaces are the future. Now, there's some contention over the word declarative, but what it means is, instead of designing the screens of your application using a screen designer, you actually write code to make the buttons appear on your screen. Now, there are some benefits to that. Apple do it very well with some of their Swift code and things like that, their interfaces. Declarative, very interesting. But once you start to get something very complicated, particularly a very in-depth business app, and don't forget, most mobile apps are not very complicated. They only have a few screens. But once you start to get to a complicated app, it is actually difficult to do declarative interfaces. Web apps, yes, there are frameworks that help with that, but it's just, this is the things you are told. You are told that. And actually, they're all lies. Every single one of those things is a lie. Mobile app development is part of the future. Web app development is part of the future. Desktop apps are not dead. And in fact, they're actually incredibly profitable still to design desktop apps. Most businesses will have some kind of web interface onto their desktop app, so it's not something you can ignore. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying that don't believe people when they say that everything's going to be a web app, because there are reasons why that's not going to happen, particularly to do with the higher pressure now to be safe with data and make sure that data is warehoused in places that are obeying laws like the GDPR and HIPAA laws and things like that, which are much harder to achieve using web interfaces. If you think about majority of the viruses at the moment, it used to be in the old days the viruses were on your computer and you would run some app or something like that, download some cracked version of Microsoft Word or some other horrible thing that you shouldn't have got but decided you would, and that cracked version of Microsoft Word or whatever had a virus in it. Well, now actually the most common vector for viruses and Trojan horses is web apps. And that's why if you deal with things like government organizations, if you deal with many hospitals and things like that, they do have applications that may have a web interface, but they're actually reached via VPNs and things like that. So there are some consideration there, but we'll talk about that in a minute, because you still can do web apps. I'm not saying don't do them. I'm just saying that that's not the truth of everything. Other things you'll be told. You'll be told mobile app developers make a ton of money, like thousands. Oh, I know this guy and he invented this app, and all it does is take pictures of statues and identifies what statue it is, and because of that it makes thousands and thousands of pounds, thousands of dollars, thousands of Deutschmarks, euros, or whatever currency you want to make up. I'm not Deutschmark, that's gone, isn't it? But you'll be told that web app developers make a ton of money. Well, you know what? Let's run the numbers. Let's see exactly how much money you could potentially make with a mobile app. So let's say you are living in a Western culture, because obviously the differences of places like Brazil and India, Pakistan, and various other countries. There is a big disparity between what would be a living wage in the United States, what would be a living wage in the United Kingdom, a living wage in rural Spain or something like that, and a living wage in Hyderabad or something like that. But even so, let's just say that what you've decided on is you want to aim for $1,500 US dollars per month as your target income. Okay, now it may mean that in Afghanistan or something like that would make you very, very rich. Okay, that's fine. But let's just say, for example, we're aiming for $1,500, which actually you wouldn't be particularly rich in the United States, but here we go. Okay, so that is an equivalent amount of 18,000 US dollars per year. That's how much you have to earn gross per year, or actually net per year, to get $1,500 per month. Okay, so that's $346.15 per week, every week, or $50 roughly, $49.45 per day, or $6.18 per hour, every hour that you would be working for an 8-hour day. Now, obviously, apps, if they're being downloaded from iOS App Store or the Android Play Store or something like that, then they're being downloaded 24 hours a day. But let's just average this out as if it was an 8-hour day. So you would be looking at that. Now, how many apps would you have to sell to get that amount of $18,000 per year? Well, an app price of 99 cents, which, according to the statistics I looked at, is the average price for a paid app. So your app's got to be good for a start for people who want to pay it. But they've got to part with 99 cents. That means you have to sell every single week 350 mobile apps all week, every week, for the rest of your time, whilst you want to live off an income of $1,500 per month. Now, if you push your prices up, as you can see in the table on the right there, and start looking at, say, $4.99 per app, which would be considered a premium app, okay, it's very unusual to get an app that's about $5. You'd have to sell 69 of those apps per week, every year, whilst you want to earn $1,500. Even if you pushed it to the absolute maximum and went for $9.99, so $10 per app, your app would have to be outstanding. It would have to be one of the best games apps out there. It would have to be, kind of League of Legends type kind of notoriety, maybe have some tie-ins. You would probably have to pay some money towards licensing or something like that as well to justify a price of $9.99. But you would still have to sell every single week 35 apps, so you could make $6.18 per hour. Now, something interesting about that. In the United States, the federal minimum wage, which means the national minimum wage for everywhere in the whole of the United States, is $7.25 per hour. So if you go and work as an unskilled worker, and I apologise because I have to pick someone, but let's say if you work in a national fast food restaurant, like a burger restaurant or something like that, generally speaking, you get around about national minimum wage per hour, maybe a little bit more if you've been there a while, because they do bump the pay up, but you're around about the national minimum wage depending on where you live, which is $7.25 an hour. That means by working in that fast food restaurant, standing at the window, talking to the cars, handing out burgers or handing out milkshakes or whatever it is that you do, you're actually going to earn $1.07 per hour more working at that burger restaurant than you would earn as a mobile developer creating mobile apps if you're not successful. Now, what does that mean? If you've got one app and you're trying to earn that $1,500 a month or $1,500 a month, you're actually going to lose money if you gave up your job working in a burger restaurant. That's pretty sad, isn't it? Just to remind you, $1 an hour more if you're on minimum wage. So the trick is, what do you have to do in order not to be in that category? Well, the trick is, first of all, don't panic, because you're not going to make one app. That's not what you're going to do. If you want to be successful, if you want to make money, then you need to have multiple apps and or a subscription model and or training courses or books or something like that. But the real secret is to spread the load so that you have multiple ways of earning money. So a versatile developer makes a ton of money. Okay, the versatile developer makes a lot of money because working smart makes money, and that's what versatility means. It means that you're adaptable. You can do the mobile app, you can do a web app, you can do an app that goes to Android, an app that goes to iOS, an app that goes to a Mac OS, and an app that goes to Windows. But you have to be versatile to do that. So if you're going to do that, and by the way, when you do go through the app stores, Apple, for example, or Android, both of those app stores will charge you money for your app. So each app, every dollar you get, they will take a percentage off of that. Now, they have changed their scale just recently because they got a bit worried that they might be seen as being too greedy. And it used to be 30%. So every dollar you earn through the App Store, they would only give you 70 cents. And they would take 30 cents away. They've changed that. It's made it a little bit more agreeable to you until you start to get rich, and then they bump that money up. Which is fair enough. I mean, they're hosting your app and they're providing the ecosystem for it, but even so, you're still losing 30% of your income. So you've worked hard to get those app downloads, put all the app code in, and you're still losing some of it. So working smart really is essential in order to stay profitable and not actually end up doing something that's, you could be earning more money doing something less stressful, like pushing a broom around a floor, or directing traffic, or polishing, I don't know, cars, or whatever it is. I don't know what things would earn minimum wage. Perfectly creditable jobs out there, but minimum wage means that it's the minimum they can get away with paying you, and nobody wants that. Using the right tools is the secret. You need a tool that is going to be the right tool to make you versatile and make you work smart. So working smart means using a coding environment which helps you write fewer lines of code. Fewer lines means faster to create your apps. Reduces bugs. And why are those two things important? Because if it's faster to create the apps and you've got plenty of ideas, you're not spending 6 months designing your app where you're not getting any money until you've finished. Instead, you're taking 2 to 3 weeks to design a very good app if you've got a good idea, and then you can move on to the next app, or you can move on to your desktop version of your app, or you can do some kind of web support type thing, offer support contracts, whatever you need to do. You can be versatile, and you can dedicate your time more intelligently. Diversity is important. But also, if you choose the right coding environment, then you're going to reduce the amount of bugs, because nowadays choosing the right tool means that you'll have a tool that actually looks for bugs and spots them before you do. It will tell you when you've made a typing mistake. You don't have to go back and go, oh, I ran it and it didn't work. This is time consuming. No, you need the tool to actually be intelligent enough to go through and spot when you've made a mistake. Okay? Now on the left there, I've got some Cobalt code. That's what that is. Cobalt from the 1970s. In fact, once upon a time, I used to be a Cobalt programmer myself. And if you look at that, you can see that every single thing about Cobalt is describing exactly how the memory is laid out and how the screen has to be laid out. Typing it in longhand. Okay. There it says, I've got a file that I'm reading in, and it contains 28 characters. Who specifies things like that? Well, that's how Cobalt works. There's nothing wrong with it. It's very popular. It used to be in business. I used to earn quite a lot of money being a Cobalt programmer back in the day. But it asks you to do everything by manually typing in code. So I got very good at typing. In fact, where I worked, when I first left school and became a developer, for the first 3 months, we didn't type our own programs. We used to write them out on sheets, coding sheets. And everybody had been doing that for years. And then all of a sudden, one day we came in and they'd introduced these new remote terminals. They looked like the keyboards that you get today, the mechanical keyboards, and they looked like a monitor. But they were a dumb terminal. And what happened was, now we could type our own programs in. Except, of course, many of the guys that had been there for years couldn't type. They'd always written their programs out by hand. All us young guys, I was about 19 or 20 at the time, writing Cobalt code, maybe a bit older. All us young guys, we could type because we'd learned how to program by typing, and that was what we did. And we had a massive advantage because now we could type really quickly. Isn't that crazy? But if you are using an app that asks you to, coding environment asks you to manually describe the user interface by typing in code, then really you haven't progressed that much beyond the COBOL of the 1960s and typing out code like you see there. So choose an environment that helps you do your job more efficiently, because the lower the cost of creating those apps, the more profitability you'll get. Don't use a tool which locks you into a single device ecosystem. What do I mean by that? Well, if you want to, you can go ahead and use tools that are created specifically by the vendors. So Apple have Xcode, which is a great system. I mean, if you're an Xcode programmer, you may well point out the many bugs in it and things like that. But Xcode is the system. But you can only create apps for Apple hardware using Xcode. You can't go into Xcode and write a program that will work on Windows. That's not how it works. It's designed for Apple kit, because Apple aren't stupid. They know how to make sure they keep making money. So don't use a tool which locks you into a single device ecosystem. The same is true of Android. If you use Android Studio, well, again, nothing wrong with it. Great piece of kit. I actually like that editor. But with that, you are only going to be creating programs that work on Android. You can't use Android Studio to then go ahead and create an app that works on iOS or Mac OS. Those two, you need Xcode for the Apple hardware. You need Android Studio or something else for the Android kit. Okay, and then when you want to use Windows, you would then go ahead and need to use Microsoft Visual Studio. Oh no. Now you've got three editors. You've got Xcode, you've got Android Studio, and you've got Visual Studio. And Visual Studio, I'm being a bit unfair, that can do some cross-platform things with Visual Studio as well, depending on what framework you choose, and that's another problem. But at the end of the day, if you only go through these single ecosystem IDEs, when you write a program for using Xcode, you have to rewrite the program completely if you want it on Android. You cannot take any of the code you wrote in Xcode and put it onto Android. You cannot do it. Will not allow you to do it. Same thing if you take your program that you've written in Xcode and try and put it on a Windows machine. Will not work. Cannot do it. There are some versions of Swift that will run on Windows, but they're just there so someone can say, yeah, you can run Swift on Windows. I don't know anybody. I know hundreds and hundreds of developers. This is my job. I can tell you I don't know anybody that uses Swift for Windows. Maybe some do, and I just haven't bumped into them, but that's not what's happening. And the other thing that you get people saying is PWAs or progressive web apps. They're great. They're kind of an alternative for a desktop app. No, they're not. What a PWA does is it takes a web page and it allows you to have that web page put down onto your device, so either your PC or your mobile phone. And it's effectively having that web page frozen with a little thing in the background that's like a web worker that will make that app work as if you are connected online. If you're very careful how you write it, you can make it work even though there's no internet connection. But generally speaking, that is not true of most PWAs. Most of them break. They'll work for a little while, but eventually they will not work properly without an internet connection. They need to be online. Okay, a proper app, a native app, doesn't work like that. Okay, I'm not saying PWAs are completely bad. There's a time and a place for them, but generally though, if it's a PWA, it provides an inadequate user experience, and that is why they're not more popular. Because if you think about it, it'd be quite easy if you take your website and then turn it into an app by hitting a magic button and off you go. I've done it, it works, but it's an inadequate user experience in comparison to a genuine native app. So what you do need to do is pick a tool which shares as much code as possible between the device types. Okay, so that you write the program once and then you can have that program go out on iOS, Android, and whatever other mobile devices you can think of, or a desktop app, because there is a difference between a mobile app and a desktop app in terms of size and functionality. That desktop app should be able to target Linux, should be able to target Windows, should be able to target Mac OS from the same code base. Now you can do that with some things. There are Electron frameworks and things like that will let you do that. But in comparison to a native app that is a native experience, it's a poor, inadequate compromise, shall we say. So working smart means use a tool which allows you to design and visualize the user interface at the same time. So you're not double handling the information. You design your screens and you visualize what you want in the same app that you are going to create the code, create the final app. That way, if you're working with someone who's a designer or the owner of the product, the person that's paying you, or a committee of people who are going to be the end users, and you've picked a few of them to say, okay, we're thinking about making the screen look like this. What do you think? Called usability testing. If you do that in the same tool that allows you to actually create the final app, you're guaranteed a better experience. It's not difficult to work out that it's easier to do that in the app than go away and design it with a graphic design tool like a Photoshop or Figma or something like that, and then get that over to the developer, give them that static graphic and say, right, now make an interface that looks like this. Why would you do that? That's crazy. What you need to do is use a tool that allows you to design and visualize the user interface at the same time. So you're only handling that process once and once only, or tweaking it, but you're not having to redo it. And then choose a tool that reuses existing and ready-made code, so you're not reinventing the wheel. You know what? The reason that I can be efficient, and I am a very prolific programmer, I know it sounds like I'm boasting, but honestly it's true. The reason I can do that is not because I'm any good. I'm a very average programmer. I've been at it a long time, and that means I can go and look for code that's already been done by one of my colleagues, or some open source code or something like that, or some examples, and I can reuse that existing code. And in fact, by using things called components, objects and classes that are already made, you can reuse those, and you know that you're not having to do all the thinking and debugging yourself, because brand new, completely novel code means brand new and completely novel ways to make bugs. If it's already existing and ready-made code, then it's very likely been well used, well tried and tested by other developers, and the chances are you're not going to end up with a poor experience. And I think really what I'm saying there is let someone else do the hard work. And this is where I say, tongue-in-cheek, yeah, be a bit lazy. Why work so hard? If you can use some code that's already been done and it's legal and acceptable for you to use that code, then why wouldn't you do it? Because you'd be an idiot otherwise. Go, no, I'd much rather work harder, thank you very much. I really want to work hard. No, don't be silly, of course not. Working smart means use a tool which allows you to create apps for Windows, Linux, Mac OS, iOS and Android using just one tool. Not Android Studio and Xcode and something else and Visual Studio Code, which basically is an overgrown version of Notepad with some cleverness added in. Nothing wrong with it, but it's not really an IDE. It's a very clever text editor. Use a tool that does the whole lot. And you can see on the screen there is a project, that's a clip from a project manager of the tool that I'm talking about, where you can see my target platforms are all in that one project. I can target Android 32-bit, and nobody uses that anymore, but Android 64-bit, iOS 64-bit, I can hit the iOS simulator, I can hit Mac OS 64-bit, Mac OS X, Mac OS ARM 64-bit. Oh, there's many many ways of saying that. I'll try that again. Mac OS ARM 64-bit, all from the same piece of code. Windows 32-bit, Windows 64-bit, all from that same project. That's what I'm talking about. One place where it all goes. Why just one tool? Well, one set of code and one project to deal with. And that means you're not having to pull up lots of different folders and different repositories and things like that. It's just one set of code, one place to look, and there it is. More importantly, if you choose the right tool, then the same code, if it's written to be what's known as platform agnostic, in other words, it doesn't care whether it's on Windows or Linux or Mac OS, iOS and Android, then the same code will work for everything. Absolutely everything. You write the code and it will work on everything. It's a smart IDE. It's a smart programming language because it targets that. That is what you're looking for. One set of updates to think of. So if you have to go in and you need to make a change, you're only doing it once, and then you can hit a button and you can produce all those versions of those apps all at once. Learn only one easy programming language, because if it's the same code that programs everything, Windows, Linux, Mac OS, iOS and Android, then there's only one programming language to learn. If you choose to use Xcode, then you might be using Swift, or you might be using Objective-C or something like that. Okay, but if you're using Android Studio, then you're using Java. And if you're going to Windows, then you might be using C# or Visual Basic, or some other C++ or something like that. Multiple different languages. So you can still, you can go off and you can say, oh, I'd rather use Xcode because it's made by Apple and therefore it's the best. But you're still going to have to go back and use that same language again for that system and that system only. Because as soon as you swap to Android, you're going to start thinking in Java, and Java works differently. So there's very little code reuse between Xcode and Android Studio. They're different. They work differently. Okay, and you can use scripting languages like Python, but you're going to give away all your source code. If you have a Python app, even if you compile it, there are Python decompilers out there that will decompile your app in half a second. No problem whatsoever. You need a native app that can't be decompiled, that is secure. That means you will not get sued by people because you've exposed all their private data. Learn only one easy programming language. Do everything for every device from that one tool. You master one tool, one language, you can hit every single device. Why just one tool? One tool that creates native apps for all mobile devices saves huge amounts of time because you don't have to keep swapping. You don't have to keep going into a different editor and opening that up and how is it I save the project in Xcode? I can't remember. How do I save it in Android? No, you don't need to do that. With one tool, you're saving a lot of time because you're not having to context switch. One set of code means you only have to add new features or fix bugs once in one piece of code, one app. You're not having to go through and look through a bunch of Java and then look at a similar bug but a different way in Xcode because now you're working in Swift. And now I've got to go into C# because neither of those are the same, so now I've got to go and fix the bug. No. Use one set of code means you only add one new feature at a time in one piece of code and goes to everything. Works for every device. And that means you're making fewer new errors because you fix a bug, test it, and you're not doing it the repeated time of 3 different devices, 3 different IDEs. You're only doing it once. That means you've got one chance to get it wrong. And you might still get it wrong. But you've got one chance. If you go to 3 or 4 different IDEs, you've got 3 or 4 chances to get it wrong. So it stands to reason. It's common sense that new errors, could be a problem. And if you get fewer errors, this means customers are happy, and also, more importantly, speeds up your development process. And we know that time equals money. And faster, more efficient, single place to work means more profit and time to work on other projects, because time really is money. It really is that. So let's just take a quick look at what we're talking about here. Okay, so this is an IDE. It's a bit messed up because I've got a weird screen resolution, but here is my IDE. And if I want to go in and say I want to open a new multi-device application, and let's just choose a blank application, why not? Okay, and after a couple of seconds, up opens my blank application. So now what I want to do is I want to go to this thing that's called the palette and choose some components to put on there, some visual elements. Okay, so I'm going to take a button, I'm going to put it over here, and I'm going to take a label like this and put it over here, and I think we'll leave it at that for now. And what I'm going to do is click on here, and I'm going to say label 1, and you can see what it's doing here is it is offering me some help to fill in my code. It's helping me learn how to code. So I'm going to just type that. Okay, so So there is my button click. What that means is when I click on this button, it's going to change this label to say something fairly mundane, which is hello world. So we're just going to run the app now. Okay, and it's going to come over on the screen. So I'm going to move it over so you can see it. And just to check that it is actually working, click on hello world. Well, amazing. Not particularly exciting, but that's what it does. Okay. Now, when we come back to the application and we decide that we're actually going to look at some of the other devices, and we chose a blank multi-device application, you can see it's got targets for Android, iOS, iOS Simulator, Linux. Yep, you can do Linux as well, and Mac OS. And by the way, that's talking to my Windows version of Linux there, because that's the way I've got it set up on here. My Mac, I've got an ARM Mac that's sitting behind me. You can't see it, but there's a nice little Mac, great big screen as well, very cool. Windows 64-bit. So let's say, okay, we suddenly decide that, yeah, this is a Windows app, yeah, it's all cool and deadly, but what we actually want to do is do a version for a iPhone 3. And we look at that and go, oh, well, you know what? Let's put that button over there because, that's how it works. And let's put that button there. Now, you can see they're in completely different places, okay? But if I go back to my master copy, which is here, you can see that they are not in the same place. That's one of the things you can do with this tool is you can say, okay, well, Android has navigation at the bottom of the screen, and iOS has navigation at the top of the screen, and you can move your controls around. But still, in the background, okay, is my same one line of code. So one line of code, and I can target my iPhone devices. One line of code, I can target the Windows apps. I mean, you wouldn't do that. You'd probably do Android and that. And just to be, making sure that we're not talking nonsense here, let's do the same thing with Android. So let's say, oh, Android, we're going to go completely crazy. And what we're going to do is put this in the middle here like this. And again, you can see it having line up the buttons. And so for Android, we're going to go, completely crazy. We're going to have a 7-inch tablet. And we're going to put the button in the middle. I don't know why you do that, but the point is you can design these screens differently depending on what device you're going to. Okay, but notice we've still got that one project. We're managing everything in the one project. And more importantly, if I go back to the code, which is what's behind here, if you can see down here, code and design, flip between them. Okay, I can go in and that's the code for the apps, plural, iOS, Android, Linux, whatever. Because what happens is the language, which is Delphi, Object Pascal, will actually have an adaptation that goes on in the background, so that if I do a file open dialog where I open and look for some files on my mobile device, which you can't actually do, but let's say it was a desktop app like Mac app, and then I had a Windows app, and that instead of making this label say hello world, what actually happened was it opened and searched for a file. It will translate the command to open the file in the program language into the native API that Windows uses or Mac uses or Linux uses. Because if you don't know, and I'm sure you do, Linux and Mac have backslashes one way and Windows has slashes that go the other way. And so normally you'd have to do some code to make that work. But actually the programming language behind it, which is Delphi, does that all for you. And more importantly, you remember I said about getting all the ready to go functionality. There's a whole thing here called Get It that has got lots and lots of free components in here. Some of them are paid, but most of them are free. You install them, off you go, and that functionality is there for you. So for example, this one, the AWS SDK, allows me to actually do the space computer, which is later on today. I think maybe later this week you'll see me get a space computer that does voice synthesis using AI. I didn't write hardly any code for that, maybe 4 or 5 lines of code, but this SDK does all the hard work for me. Makes me look really cool, but I don't have to do anything, and that component is tested very well, ready to go, plug in, building blocks of code ready for you. And the same is true of the palette. If we look down the palette here, this is restricted because I'm looking at an Android tablet, but there are all sorts of crazy things like database handling, FireDAC, MySQL handling, talking to big corporate databases, SQL Server, SQL Server, internet connection stuff, HTTP client, data access, talking to all sorts of databases, desktop databases, SQLite, and all those kind of things. All of the types of controls that you could use, like a timer edit, a currency edit, camera component. You want to take pictures? It's all built in for you. It's like 2 lines of code to take a picture. Speed button. You name it, it's got it. Very, very useful. Okay, so let's go back to our slideshow that we were looking at earlier on. Okay, this is the product that I just showed you, and what's important here is that you can get it for absolutely free. No catches. We're not going to charge you all of a sudden. As long as you fulfill the obligations of the license, there are some restrictions. We don't expect you to be a multi-millionaire and get the free version and use it for the rest of life. So once you go over a certain amount of income, then we do expect you to buy the professional version. Same is true of Microsoft and a few other systems as well. But whilst you're a student, whilst you're learning, or whilst you're a hobbyist, or you're trying this system out, you can use this completely free. There is a trial version, the full version as well, but completely free. Just go to that link that's on the screen there, embarcadero.com/products/Delphi/starter. Some other really cool things that you should know about. Pexels.com, completely free graphics of all types. And I mean all, absolutely everything you could ever want. on there. Totally free, no royalties required. So if you want to put, you've seen some of the cool graphics I've had in the background here. All of those are from Pexels. Go to Unsplash. You can also have splash screens and desktop backgrounds and stuff like that. Also free, no viruses, which is the most important thing, because a lot of these sites that you go to with free backgrounds have got viruses on and all sorts of horrible things like that. Fontlibrary.org, free fonts. So later on, if you watch my space computer demo, you'll see me using a kind of Star Trek-y type font, shall we say, and inspired by Paramount TV's Star Trek series. They're very unusual font. I got those fonts from here. They also had Klingon fonts, because the Klingon language, believe it or not, is taught in some universities. But you can get free fonts from there, absolutely free. Font Awesome, all of the little graphics that you see those on the screen in the green, blue and pink blocks there. Most of the apps that you see that with mobile apps are using Font Awesome fonts. There is a free set, and I actually use the Pro version, which is a paid version. But Font Awesome is the place to go. And also, if you're going to have animations, again, look at the space computer demo that I do. There is a thing there called a Lottie animation. Go to lottiefiles.com and it will blow your mind about the free things that are in there. And lastly, if you want your apps to look really absolutely amazingly cool, go to delphistars.com and download their free app styles there that are professionally designed, top quality styles for your apps. And in fact, a lot of those are actually built into the Rad Studio IDE as well, so you can just install it from that Get It tool that I showed you, where I showed you the AWS thing. It's very straightforward. So anyway, that's a whirlwind tour. If you stick around with us for the rest of today and for the rest of this week, we're going to show you an awful lot more. Okay. I know this sounds a bit like I'm selling a product, but I'm actually trying to tell you what is good about the product and what is my reason for saying this, I think, is the best tool you can use, and the efficiency you can make. I told you I get up every single day and I write code, even now after 38 plus years, and I still love the job. I still don't regret becoming a software developer. I think it was the best thing I ever did. Okay, you can should have time for live Q&A afterwards, and the slides and the link and the replay of this video is going to be available at tinyurl.com/MBT Coder. And also, if you registered for this bootcamp this week, you'll get notifications through with all the replays automatically as well. So you should hear more about it. Anyway, my name's Ian Barker, and I'm Embarcadero's developer advocate. You can get me at ian.barker@embarcadero.com. Please do. Feel free to email me. You can also follow me on X/Twitter at @punctuation, and go to my website and learn more about me at about.me/Ian Barker. Thanks for watching. Have a good week. It's going to be a long one.
Well, I hope you all enjoyed that. Someone told me earlier on that my logo here was reversed. So now maybe the background's reversed. If it is reversed, can you let me know in the chat, because cameras swap things around and it gets a little bit confusing. Someone says it's looking okay, good. Your image is correct. Hurrah! I'm not back to front, even though I feel like I'm scratching my nose with the wrong hand. Okay, we don't really have a lot of time to answer questions. There were a whole raft of questions from people. Lots of people saying thanks and things like that. Lots of questions about replays and stuff like that. There will be replays of every single session that we've got. And you'll also get notified of that via the emails and through the social media and things like that. So don't worry if you didn't catch everything that was going on. It will be available later. Also, all of the slides are going to be put up on a GitHub repository. I'll post that up later where that's going to be, but my slides are already up there. And also, because I work for Embarcadero, I actually will be posting all of my slides as a blog post as well on the main blog. So if you go to blogs.embarcadero.com, spelled then .com, you can see my slides there once they're live, and they're not quite live yet. I've had a busy time.